Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Super excited about today's episode. We're joined by Stephanie Crook, Vice President of Org and Talent Capability at Intel Corporation. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to see you, Chris, and I'm excited to be here. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm always feel like whenever I see someone in their office, I'm always like scoping out their bookshelves behind them. Like you're like, we've learned a lot about each other, right? During COVID as well. Like, ooh, I love the swan. I love the duck. I feel like there's a theme there going on. There's a passion.
Yeah, my grandfather actually used to carve those ducks. So, but yeah, I have a tendency not to throw books away. So I just collect them over time. So that's what you see behind me.
I always ask everyone, like, have you read all those books?
I have, but I have also lived a long life. So
wow, I'm impressed. I'm impressed because most people are like, no, Chris. The vast majority are like, no, I haven't read them all. They just look great. Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your role at Intel and your sort of journey to where you are.
Well, right now, I have a really cool job where I get to lead the teams that deliver on all of the solutions to close on capability gaps for the business. So all of the organizational and talent capability gaps, or we provide all the solutions for the business. So functions like org development and culture, performance, learning, leadership, management, all of those kind of capabilities. And so it's a great time because talent is such a huge, important play to differentiate ourselves and be able to really be that lever that enables Intel strategy. So it's a really exciting time to be doing this type of work. How I got here, I think is really what you were asking. So I was fascinated by human behavior, and I went to my undergraduate in psychology, and I loved every class I took, and especially the behavioral psychology courses. I love Skinner, who's like my hero. And anyway, I thought I was going to be a therapist, go into clinical psychology, and because I was just fascinated by the human experience and how one changes. And I got into the actual practical elements of psychology and realized I was not wired with patience for the work.
Okay.
And so I went back to my professors and said, what in the world should I be doing? Knowing that I love the science of it, but I'm not suited for the individual practical clinical work. And they said, oh, Steph, you need to go into industrial psychology or organizational behavior. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. I ended up getting a degree at Brigham Young University. And I had some amazing professors that were doing some really interesting work around leadership and teaming and effectiveness of organizations, and how do you design the work in order to really enable people to do their best work, and culture. And I just realized I found my place, right? Yeah. So, and in between those experiences, I had done some work in different companies that happened to be unionized, mining companies and industrial companies. And I realized, again, my patience level, I really wanted to work for a company that went fast and had a culture that was very performance-based. And so I was really drawn to the tech industry. And so I ended up landing a role at Intel, and I got to do a lot of rotations in HR and experience different work. And I really enjoyed the business. So I worked there for a couple of years, and then I left HR and I worked directly for the business leaders who were doing the work in the manufacturing teams for the engineering work.
Was that intentional? You're like, I want to experience.
Yeah. I wanted to be in the business. I really wanted to do the org design work that really lit me up. You know, my first couple of years when I was doing performance management and having to help with discipline action and that sort of thing it just didn't fuel me. And so I had just an amazing leader that believed in me, took a chance on me. It wasn't a role in his team. He let me come in and just experiment and try different things with his org, with his team. And it was just the coolest opportunity. And really, I would say was the pivotal moment for me to really see confidence and experimentation and learning. And anyway, so I stayed in the business for quite some time. And I didn't go back into HR. And then I actually left altogether after I'd had my fourth child. So one of the things, I had a really great mentor tell me, he said, Stephanie, you really need to know what you want. What do you want to build? And who do you need to serve? And that will end up helping you know what you need to do throughout your career.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was so stretched, and who I really needed to serve was really, really difficult because I am wired to be all in. And I was flying, I had a global role, and I felt like I wasn't doing anything to the level that I expected, whether it be, how I was showing up as a wife, as a mother, as an employee, as a leader. And so I actually decided I'm going to bow out and be more present with my kids. And so I actually left the workforce for 8 years.
Wow.
And then returned back when my youngest was in first grade. And so I got into a different industry for a while. And then I had an opportunity to come back into Intel because HR recognized that they needed to have people with the OD skill set. Because that was when we were really trying to pivot to an expanded suite of services beyond the PC to more data centric capabilities. And so they needed people to help these leaders come in and rethink the work. And so I came back to Intel about 8 years ago, and subsequently have had all sorts of different jobs in, either working inside of business HR or working at the HR level doing strategy and culture work, and now doing this role. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I have really appreciated the work that I've done at Intel because I've been able to work in so many different teams, from the design of the product all the way down through the manufacturing. So to be able to see how everything works,
truly understand the business.
It's just been great. So anyway, so that's been my journey.
Love it. Oh my God, there's so much to unpack. It's incredible, fascinating. I want to touch upon what you mentioned about you leaving the business. Did you say 8 years? What advice would you give to other female leaders? Because there's many that, even my wife have had this conversation. There seems to be this narrative that you have to sacrifice one or the other, or you can't be a great, a leader, parent, husband, etc., wife. One has to give, and sacrifice. And you walking away, I'm sure it couldn't have been easy to do that. And I'm sure returning also wasn't easy to return to the workplace. So I'd love if you could share, what advice would you give to other female leaders and mums and dads as well, about the experience of why you left, why you decided, and how it was coming back.
I think that one of the things is to not feel like you have to fit in a certain mold, like there's like a model that works for everybody, because there's not, right? That goes probably without saying. I would say really just being honest with yourself and what your needs are, and then having the faith and confidence that your skills, as long as you keep them up while you're not working and you keep your contacts in your network, you can always return. And I would say that was my biggest worry about leaving. And I happened to be working for the head of all of our corporate services, an executive his name was Gary. And I went to Gary and I said, I don't feel like I'm doing everything that I need to do and still like happy at the end of the day, but I don't want to leave. I love my work because it's such a part of your identity, right? It just becomes like who you are. Like, so, and he said to me, I'll never forget this. He said, Steph, I have been through 2 divorces, and looking back, you can't ever get that time back. If you feel like you need to leave, you can always come back. You have to have faith in your capabilities to come back. He gave me that push to be like, you know what, if that's what I feel like I really need for a while, let me just try it out and I can always come back. So I will tell you though, the first 6 months was really hard. And I had been so wired to see my value in the work and my deliverables, and having other people in the workplace provide me all of this wonderful feedback of what I was doing for them. And then you go into the environment where you have little kids and they're not telling you how great you are. Like, you're just like trying to get through the day in and day out of stuff, and trying to realize that my identity is not about, you know, the role that I have in the workplace, but it's just like who I am as a person. And I had to really figure that out. So that was an adjustment for me. But once I sort of had realized that my self-worth wasn't wrapped around my job title, it was such a great experience. And I was able to have more bandwidth to help my husband grow his business. And there were other things I had outlets for. But I always kept in touch with the people who I really appreciated, who helped me grow. And I kind of always knew, Chris, that I wanted to eventually go back to work because I love work. I love what I do. But when I went back the first time, I made the mistake of not bringing the whole family along, where it was like, okay, I go back full time. They're all used to coming to me for everything, not my husband. I'm at work all day long. I come home and they have waited to, like, I have 4 kids. So they've all waited to be able to air whatever their needs are as I walk through the door at 6 p.m.
So that's a good lesson for everyone listening, you know, that you wouldn't have known, right? And considered.
Yeah, I was like I'm a systems thinker, and it didn't occur to me that an element in the system had changed, and I hadn't helped change the other parts of the system.
Yeah.
So literally, when I went back to Intel, before we went back, we all went to therapy. Literally, I took everybody into the therapist's office, and we all sat there and talked about what everybody's needs were, and how things were going to be different, and what kind of communication tools my husband needed, because, you know, he was going to be the point of contact when they got home from school. So yeah, it was an adjustment for everybody. It was not just like the one person that goes back to work. It's the whole family that's impacted. So it was a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it as well, because my wife had the same exact. She sat me down when she took a year out when we had our first daughter, Robin, and she tapped me down, and I could see that she wasn't doing great. And I was like, well, you know, what's wrong? And then she said the same thing. She felt like she didn't have an identity anymore.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, at the time I didn't get it. I was like, what do you mean? You're an amazing mom, you're amazing, you know, you're an incredible wife. Like I just did, but I realized, like what you're saying, a lot of what her value and self-worth was her job. Yeah. And how she was seen there and the success. And I was like, oh, okay, right. Like, and you just said exactly the same thing. And she really struggled with that for a while. And I was like, and almost she didn't even see how amazing she was as a mom, and the fact that without what she did, I couldn't do what I do and grow this business through a team. I was like, the success that I'm having is not possible without you. And vice versa, and the quality time that you have with Robin and all of the other things, you just couldn't see those things because everything was wrapped around the job title, the role, the people, and everything. And I think that's something that you kind of learn the hard way. No one, when you ask people for advice about becoming parents and stuff like that, no one mentioned those things. no one mentioned those challenges, right? As well.
I asked my manager, and he was awesome about this. I said, because I came back supporting a business line, and they gave me a pretty difficult team because it had all sorts of different capabilities bought and fused together. It was we were doing imaging and camera IP, and it was a global team that had a lot of problems. And I said, before I even meet the GM, I need a month. I need a month to learn everything about the business. Don't throw me like, I need time to kind of entry in. And my boss was really cool about that. But I could tell that my processing, my like literal mental processing capability was much slower than it had been when I had left the workforce. And so it took a while for my brain to really catch up and click into the pace of decision-making and problem solving, because it just was a muscle I hadn't been using at the level that I had before I had left the company. You just have different skills that you use as a mom. And so you just almost have to like give yourself some like entry time, almost negotiate that up front, that learning curve, and let your brain kind of catch up to the way in which, you need to process and perform.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that really well, that entry in, and having a supportive manager is like a make or break.
I know we didn't plan to speak about any of this, by the way.
No, I know, but that's not right. I think that the companies that figure this out are going to differentiate themselves, because
I just think it's important.
We have such rich knowledge base of women, right, that are looking to get back into the workforce. How do we make it easy for them?
Or many, and the point is, I was trying to make as well, is I know many that there's such a high anxiety that they just don't return.
Right.
Like to the point where I know many of, again, my wife's friends that just don't feel that they can, like this inferiority complex, or that it's too late, or et cetera, along the way. So I just thought, whilst you mentioned it, it'd be great to share your experience with everyone that's been along the way. And I love that. And I assume the one of the reasons that you've been with Entel so long is the fact that they've given you those opportunities to experience different functions and roles. Because it's very rare in this day and age you find someone that stays in a business this long. If very rare. It's getting more and more rare, actually. Would that be fair to say?
It is. I mean, I am one of those employees that we call bleed blue. I feel like Intel has always been a place where the best ideas can win. And the culture has really married well with my preferences and my strengths, Chris. And it's been a company that you're never bored. You're always able to grow and learn. And because they've always been so great about, flexing to the needs of my personal life, right? Whether it's like, hey, you can go 30 hours, you can go part-time, you can be full-time, you can work from home. They made it almost so difficult to even quit as a working mom, because they were so, like, whatever you need, we'll figure it out. Right. So, Intel's always been pretty progressive that way. I mean, this was I was hired in 97.
Wow.
And in 99, I had my first child, and I was working part-time and working flex hours and working from home. So part of the time. And so I feel like this company has always provided me the opportunity to have rich learning experiences and have my personal life work. I am grateful that I went and worked for other company in between, because it made me really recognize that there is such a thing as a strong culture fit. Because I didn't fit in that culture, the one that I returned right after coming back into the workforce. I didn't come back to Intel. I went to a company in the insurance industry, and it was very relational oriented. It was very hierarchical. It was slower paced. And I remember feeling anxious and frustrated, even though they were paying me a ton of money. I was so unhappy. And I took a significant pay cut to come back to Intel.
There comes a point, doesn't it, in your career where, because I was always chasing more money, like many people, just growing up, thinking that that's what's going to make me happy. And then the more and more I made, every time I reached that mark, I wasn't satisfied. And I went up, and I realized at the one point it was, and I remember seeing the sort of Simon Sinek Start With Why, sort of the Golden Circle TED Talk. Like, what is your why and your purpose? And I remember sitting there making amazing money at lunchtime, watching that on TED. I couldn't answer the question. I had no idea what my why was, or the purpose, or why I exist, why I was in this business. And there's that moment where I realized I've literally just spent all this time just chasing money and these job titles, thinking that was what was going to fulfill me. So when we quit and started this company, I went from probably 5 times less what I was making.
Yeah.
So, I still
What a
don't
watershed moment for you.
Yeah, even now I make less than what I made as a very highly paid sales director in that company. Obviously, we're investing it back in the company, which is one of the main reasons. But I'm actually 10 times more happier. 4 kids. You're a wife, and you're a very senior executive. What advice would you give of how you manage and juggle spinning all those plates, or would you say you can't spin it? You can't spin all those plates at the same time, and you have to accept that. Like, what advice would you give to people?
Well, I will say that you can't be that person that isn't willing to ask for help. I leverage a lot of wonderful people, whether it's carpooling, and my husband's amazing, and I actually had to sit down and delegate. Like, I'm not the point of contact at school anymore. My husband is. You can access him easier because I'm in meetings all day and he's not. I think that really kind of sitting together as a family and figuring it out together, so you're not sort of feeling like it's all on you. I also outsource. Like, the second I went back to work, I'm outsourcing cleaning and cooking. I'm like, there's certain things you just know that there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so understanding what that really means and what that day is going to look for you, and how you're going to be accessible and win to your kids and to your husband, I think is really important. And then just constantly going, okay, like, what's important, and am I meeting the calendar test, right? Like, I say what's important. Does that really marry up with what I'm doing in my schedule? And how do I make sure I have certain boundaries around that? And I think it's a constant, like, pulsing, right? Because your work will ebb and flow, and there's going to be times where you're just working a huge amount of hours. You just took on a big job, you're ramping. And I always say that where conflict happens is when unmet expectations meet. And so I always bring my kids together and say, okay, the next 3 weeks, it's going to be really, really tough.
I love the fact that you do that, by the way. I just love the fact that you're so, you rather than just, I love the fact that you're conscious to actually just sit them down and say, I'm not going to be present for the next few weeks. And just so you know, this is why. I just love that. Yeah. I just love the fact that you sat down with the family. I'm already thinking about that. I don't do stuff like that. And it causes conflict between myself and my wife. It causes conflict between the fact that I'm spending time with, whereas you've was conscious that you're like, this is going to have an effect. Let's have a conversation about it. It sounds obvious, but many people just don't do it. And it just causes the friction.
Yeah, it really does that. Because then I'll just say, okay, let's look, like, how can we shore this up? Right. So for example, one of my daughters did water polo, and she was traveling a lot. And so I said, how can we help, like, get other people to take you to these events? Or, like, my daughter does crew, and how can we make sure that we can, lean in here and then have other people help us here. So it's a community, right? So, like, know your community, ask for help. Like, you can't do it all. So that would be my biggest advice, Chris, because I love my work. I get so much meaning from my work, and my kids see it, and they see me enjoying what I do. I have 3 girls and 1 son, and all of my girls all want to work because they see joy in it, right? So they know it can be done, but you have to do it with a community.
No, I think the advice you just shared is I've learned a lot, honestly, from it. And I think a lot of people out there, many female leaders actually, and my wife, I've heard it directly from her, the challenges that you're describing as well. And many kind of just think that I can't have it, so I'm not going to try, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to try and have kids because I can't be a successful female leader and have that. That's not a thing. And whereas you're really setting that example for your kids and your daughters and your son, and that you can do that. Yes, it's going to be hard, and we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation about it, and we're going to have to carpool now and again and do these things. But I think it's really important that we have this conversation and share it. So
I will say, like, when I got promoted to a vice president, the first thing I did was take my family out, because it was their promotion. It wasn't just like, it was our promotion, right? Because the family unit, it's like I wouldn't have gotten there without everybody, right? So
Yeah.
and they very much appreciate that it is a conjoined set of goals as a family unit. So
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, listen, before I let you go, because again, we're gonna have to do part 2 now and actually talk about some of the great work that you're doing in your organization. But I feel like this was sometimes these conversations happen unexpectedly, and that's one of the reasons why I love having this show as a conversation. And I feel like we don't talk about what you just shared enough, actually, at all. And I think many people need to hear that out there. But before I let you go, I do want to jump into our quick fire round that we do with every guest.
Would love that, Chris.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
So yeah, exactly. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you only got 30 seconds per question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah. If you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR, what would that be and why? Maybe like a frustration,
Yeah. So I wouldn't call it HR. I think HR is antiquated.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, words matter. I grew up in a family with an attorney as my father, and human resources is very Tayloristic. Like it's like widgets moving around the board versus like the innovators that we are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people. It's about human behavior and people. I would just even change the title.
Love that. How do you think your family and friends, or actually, and your kids would describe what you do for a living?
I help people by hundreds of phone calls. I'm always on the phone.
On the phone all day. That's probably exactly, you're probably right. That would be exactly what it is, right?
Yeah. That's probably the best way. But they know I do help people do better work.
Okay, that's a great way. Yeah, okay, that's a great way of putting it. What legacy do you want to leave behind? For your children and the family.
I would say have faith, be kind, and work hard. I've always taught my kids that people are more important than things, and to invest in people and relationships. And so I think that also learning and knowledge and learn, just being curious has always been something that's really important. But I think people should love work. And so I hope that my kids have that legacy. I know that they're all great kids. I am very blessed with really great kids, but it's as important as what they do as how they treat people.
Yeah, that's great. Normally this question I ask people, have you ever considered quitting HR? But I'm going to reframe it and say,
I have quit HR several times.
Yeah, I know. That's why I laughed when I said it. So I'm going to reframe it and say, if you wasn't doing the job that you're doing now, what would you be doing? If you wasn't doing HR, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh, I would love to be a detective.
The detective.
Oh yeah. I'm obsessed with detective shows, Chris.
Well, you're definitely good at analyzing, so that obviously helps.
Yes, and trying to like solve a case would be amazing.
Cool. I can imagine you sitting there watching CSI a lot.
Indeed.
What's the biggest investment you'd say you've made in yourself in your career?
My education. Yeah. When I was 18, my parents weren't able to help me at all with my education. And so that investment in myself was, I would say, really, I have used my education my entire life. And I would say it's something that I'm pretty proud of because I was able to do it on my own.
You mean you worked whilst studying, like you paid?
Yeah, either worked or had scholarships, and I just everything
made it happen.
Yeah, made it happen.
Yeah. And that doesn't end, right? Whether it's formal or informal, the learning, the constant learning.
Oh, for sure. And just even having the relationships that I built in my graduate education with some of those professors, I still work with some of them today. I mean, it's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah. Who would you say, this is quite a tough one, but is the person in your career that's had the biggest impact on you? The person you've worked with?
Oh gosh, that's the hardest question, Chris, because there's so many people that end up having different points in your career a real impact in the way you think about yourself, you think about the work, right? Instead, and I've had the privilege of having been sponsored by some incredible leaders that have seen potential in myself that I didn't see in me.
Could you give one of them? Could you give some of them a shout out?
Yeah, I mean, like when I came back to Intel, the head of business HR, his name's Matt Smith, and he did skip levels down below, and he would meet with people like myself because I came back sort of lower in the organization, and he would do 15-minute skip levels for some folks when he would come to the different sites. And he saw something in me and gave me opportunities and progressively like moved me to different roles, just asked me, kept saying, can you do this job? Can you do this job? And was the reason why I was able to do the culture work across Intel. Put me on a stage with all of our top 600 executives when I was not an executive to launch all of the culture evolution work and working directly with the CEO. I mean, it was just amazing. But he saw something in me, had faith in me, and just gave me the platform.
Love it. And I just love asking that questions because those are the people that they deserve a shout out. And then very last question, what piece of advice would you give to sort of the HR leaders of tomorrow?
For the HR leaders of tomorrow, I would make sure that you have curiosity in human behavior. And you're just curious as a person and you're willing to take some risks. And you have experiences and opportunities inside the business.
Love that. Well, look, thanks so much for, we went sideways in the conversation, but I'm so happy we did actually, because I feel like this is super insightful and I'm really, really excited to share this with our audience. Genuinely. I appreciate you sharing everything and your vulnerability as well and sharing your journey with our listeners. It means a lot. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are definitely going to relate. And if they are on that journey, I think they're definitely it's going to be very valuable advice for them as well.
It was something that you learn as you go, but I am so grateful that I came back. I didn't let those, because everybody has those insecurities and fears around, am I going to be good enough? Right? Am I going to be successful? How is this going to land with everybody around me? And you work through it just like any other problem, right? And you just have to have confidence that, you built some skill sets that are, skills that you can build on when you come back into the workplace. So I think that there's so much capability out there, and there's not enough talent that's coming into the workforce. Like that is one of the things that we're experiencing at Intel is there is a scarcity of talent. So for anybody who's questioning, should I go back? Absolutely. Like if you really do want to go back into the workplace, there's a place for you. So
amazing.
Thanks, Chris. This is fun. It did go a different direction, but it was fun.
I know, like Chris, none of the questions we agreed on topic to talk about.
That's all cool.
We'll save it for part 2. Don't worry.
That's great. I would be happy to come back and have another call.
Well, listen, enjoy the rest of your day. You're just starting, right? I'm just ending, and I wish you all the best, and I'll see you soon. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Take care, Chris.